Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
Hello everyone, it's Chris here, and forgive me if I sweat a bit. I switched the aircon off to be able to record in peace, otherwise I'll pick up the arm of a aircon, and it's quite warm here in Phuket. But anyway, at the Rumble Legacy we're doing things a bit different. So every Sunday we would bring out a normal Legacy video, which there's a teaser on at YouTube. But on Fridays we have like a movie night, or we have other videos which is not produced by us as such, but we have permission to broadcast them. So they might be from places like Fighting Men of Rhodesia, but they might also be other type of programs which we got hold of and which has no copyright on it anymore. So that's basically how we're running it that side. You're welcome to come over. You've got the links, it's in the description. A lot of you has come over. I would invite you, please come over. It's much easier for us to speak there than to speak on YouTube, and I cannot guarantee you how long Legacy YouTube is still going to exist. I just don't know, because they are otherwise. So anyway, the one coming out now, it's already playing that side, is an interview I got hold of with a very famous Rhodesian, and he also calls himself a South African, called Arthur Harris. Now Arthur Harris is better known as Bomber Harris, and the flight crew called him Butcher or Butch Harris, and he was a guy in the Second World War in the RAF. He was Air Marshal, which means a full general, and in charge of the bomber command. So he's the guy who was bombing Nazi Germany, and must I say also a lot of occupied France. And they, after the war, became a lot of critique was against this guy and his command. The question I have here is it wisdom to look back with 2020 vision and criticize people who, during the time when they're doing the actions, were following orders, which were legal orders, by the way. And so we have a video out there. So if you want to come and look at it, please do so. I'll put the link here below. And like always, I'll just leave a 5 or 10 minute clip for you. And yes, it's available on the internet. Copyright is gone on it because it's more than 50 years since it was published. So you can look at it on the internet as well, or come over to Rumble and let's look at the video there and leave a few comments, and then perhaps we can talk about it further. And that's it for now. Thank you and God bless.
Now, you mentioned earlier, sir, this morning, about your relationships with the United States Air Force generals, and I would imagine that sometimes when resources are scarce and personalities are strong, misunderstandings will arise, and indeed personal relationships become very, very important. Would you care to comment on your relations with other Air Force commanders, such as Lord Dowding or Lord Portal, Lord Tedder?
Portal, I always had 100% respect for. He was an absolutely first-class type in every way. He was far and away the best brain in any of the three services. I think he was the backbone of the Chiefs of Staff, quite apart from his job as being boss of the Air Force. People say I had a dispute with him over oil. Well, I had arguments with him over various things. But they weren't bitter arguments, they were discussions. And naturally enough, I had the job of doing. He had the job of saying, see if you can do this. And I had to argue whether I thought I could or couldn't. As for that Dresden business that is always cropping up, Dresden was bombed on a direct order from Eisenhower's headquarters. And when I informed the Air Ministry that I had got the order to wreck Chemnitz, Leipzig, Dresden in that order, I had it confirmed in writing from the Air Ministry. But about that time, all the big shots were up in Yalta, disputing with each other. And at the same time, Winston, I think, was having a somewhat bitter dispute with Archie Sinclair, the Secretary of State for Air, as to what, if anything, we were doing to help the Russians forward. And in between all this triangle emerged this order to write off Chemnitz, Leipzig, and Dresden in that order, which we did. There was one other reason for it. The intelligence side of the services, and I think of the civil side, intelligence, were all under the impression, I think they were misinformed, that the Germans were preparing an Alpine redoubt in the foothills of the Alps.
Yes.
And in this redoubt, the stories got wilder and wilder. They had underground factories. They were getting all their best troops moved in there, vast stores of ammunition, probably super new, unheard of weapons which would out-atom the atom bomb, etc., etc., etc. And when we defeated them otherwise, these picked troops were going to move back into that redoubt and carry on the war at immense cost in casualties and chaos and money to the Allies. Well, the whole thing was an absolute mare's nest. There was barely a word of truth in it. I think one or two caves were used as factories, but for general purposes. But there you are, Chemnitz, Leipzig,
yes,
and Dresden were the last through routes,
yes,
by road and rail, in which the German forces and reserves could be moved north to south or south to north, and especially back into that redoubt.
Yes, I think there's no doubt at all, sir, that in the last 20 or 30 years that the name of Dresden has assumed an emotional association out of all proportion to what was happening elsewhere.
But as I say, do you ever hear any tears shed over Lorient and Nazaire?
Not at all. How often do we hear, for example, of the comparison with what the Royal Navy did in the blockade in World War I
Exactly.
to Germany? So it's...
Yes, that blockade.
Quite.
Of course, the thing is that the Air Force is always accused of carrying out war against the civil population. All major wars are always and always have been against the civil population. Now, as you say, in the first war, the naval blockade, what strategy did any navy ever have except war against the nation as a whole?
Absolutely.
By blockade.
Absolutely.
They had no other strategy. They couldn't have any other strategy. There's no such thing as another naval strategy. And in the First War, according to the figures we produced, the blockade of Germany is stated to have killed 800,000 Germans.
Yes.
As for the army, what army besieging a major city has ever allowed the civil population out? I've heard no example bar one. Haven't they always adopted the idea the more mouths in there, the sooner they'll have eaten the last cat, dog, and sewer rat and have to come out and surrender, and meanwhile every missile they can lob into the unfortunate city is lobbed in there.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
And believe you me, as an ex-Rhodesian and ex-South African, I would find it very hard to convince my many Afrikaner friends that armies don't fight against the civil population. Our last great colonial war was the Boer War, and the sole strategy in that war was scorched earth. Burn the farms, 30,000 of them, destroy the crops, slaughter the cattle, shoot or loot the horses, make life insupportable throughout the breadth and length of the land, so that the commandos in the field could find no succor or sustenance anywhere. And with what result? The non-combatants from those farms had to be concentrated in camps. That was when the word concentration camp originated. And with what result? Owing to the usual, what the Yankees called snafus, or we call ball-ups, and the lack of medical knowledge in those days. What happened in that war was that 14,000 men and boys down to the age of 12 died in the field of battle, Boers. 39,000 Boer women and children died in the concentration camp, directly due to the scorched earth policy.
Yes.
All major wars
Yes.
have always been, and in the future will be ever more so, directed against the nation as a whole.
Yes, I think it's very important, sir, to keep that kind of point in context. I wonder now if we could just look at one or two other aspects of your relationships. Did you see a great deal, for example, of Field Marshal Montgomery?
I've known Montgomery for years before the war because he was a teacher at Camberley Staff College when I was a student there. And I was always very impressed by two things. One was the clearness with which he could expound his own ideas, which I always thought sounded to me first class, and the rather mocking attitude that the cavalryman held for him as being just one of these infantry fellows, you know, who really didn't know much about war as a whole. And then, of course, he came out to Palestine when I was AOC in Palestine a year before the war. And it struck me straight away the speed with which he picked up the job, and especially cooperating. He started by, as soon as he saw me, he said, "This is no place for aircraft, no job for aircraft." I said, no job for soldiers either. It's a job for police, but there ain't none." And after that, he very soon was demanding air help and making very useful suggestions as to how it should be applied to help the army. We very soon concocted a system whereby we put what we called an air pin on an area, dropped pamphlets, used loudspeakers saying, "Don't move out of there or you'll be shot. And if you stay where you are, you won't be hurt." And then the army went in there in buses and mopped up grabbed off the fellows they wanted to grab if they could find them in the hidey holes, which was a great improvement on staggering all night over the mountains and then finding the bird had flown by the time they got to the place.
Right.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive notifications.